Assalamu alaikum. I'm Saiful Islam, your host for Allah Radio 1, broadcasting live from Sheffield to the UK and the rest of the world. This is the 7 o'clock slot, coming to you tonight and every night throughout the month of Ramadan. Please join us and listen to the stories of the men around the messenger. We're going to carry on with Abd Allah Ibn Umar tonight. Before we start, please join me in this small prayer. Ya Allah, we depend on you. We have no power of our own. When things are going well for us, we know they have come from you, and we have no power of our own. In our trials, we rely on you. In our temptation, we trust in you. In our success is in your hands, and so is our lives. We have no power of our own. Ya Jabir, Ya Kareem, we cannot do without you. Save us from all evil, and guide us going out and coming in, now and forever. Ameen. Abd Allah Ibn Umar, the persistent and repentant to Allah. When he was at the peak of his long life, he said, I swore the oath of allegiance to the Prophet, peace be upon him. I never broke my oath, nor have I turned to something else in this day. I have never sworn allegiance to those in civil strife, nor did I awake a sleeping Muslim. These words are a summary of the life of that virtuous man who lived past the age of 80. His relationship with Islam and the Prophet began when he was only 13 years old, when he accompanied his father to the Battle of Badr, hoping to have a place among the Mujahideen, but he was sent back by the Prophet due to his young age. Since that day, and even before that, when he accompanied his father with his hijrah to Al-Madinah, that young boy who possessed premature manly merits began his relationship with the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him. From that day till the day he passed away at the age of 85, we will always find him persistent, repentant, never deviating from his path, not even by a hair's breadth, neither breaking the oath of allegiance which he had sworn, nor breaking a pledge he had made. The merits of Abd Allah Ibn Umar, which dazzle people's visions, are abundant. Among these are his knowledge, modesty, the straightness of his conscience and path, his generosity, piety, persistence in worship, and his sincere adherence to the Prophet's model. By means of all these merits and qualities did Ibn Umar shape his unique personality, his sincere and truthful life. He learned a lot of good manners from his father, Umar ibn al-Khattab, and together with him, they learned from the Prophet, peace be upon him, all the good manners and all that can be described as noble virtues. Like his father, his belief in Allah and his Prophet was perfect. Therefore, the way he pursued the Prophet's steps was admirable. He was always looking at what the Prophet was doing in every matter, then humbly imitating his deeds to the finest detail. For example, whenever the Prophet prayed, there also would Ibn Umar pray. And on the same spot, if the Prophet invoked Allah while standing, then Ibn Umar would invoke Allah while standing. If the Prophet invoked Allah while sitting, so also would Ibn Umar invoke Allah while sitting. On the same particular route, where the Prophet once dismounted from his camel and prayed 2 rakas, so would Ibn Umar do the same while traveling to the same place. Moreover, he remembered that the Prophet's camel turned twice at a certain spot in Mecca. Before the Prophet dismounted and before his 2 rakas of prayer, the camel may have done that spontaneous to prepare itself a suitable halting place, but Ibn Umar would reach that spot, turn his camel in a circle, then allow it to kneel down. After that, he would pray the 2 rakas in exactly the same manner he had seen the Prophet, peace be upon him, do so. Such exaggerated imitation once provoked the mother of the believers, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, to say, no one followed the Prophet's steps in his coming and going as Ibn Umar did. He spent his long blessed life and his firm loyalty adhering to the Prophet's sunnah, to the extent that a time came when the virtuous Muslims were asking Allah, O Allah, save Ibn Umar as long as I live, so that I can follow him. I don't know anyone still adhering to the early translations except him. Similar to that, strong and firm adherence to each of the Prophet's steps and practices was Ibn Umar's respect for the prophetic traditions, the hadith. He never related a hadith unless he remembered it to the letter. His contemporary said none of the companions of the Prophet was more cautious not to add or subtract something from a hadith than Abd Allah Ibn Umar. In the same way, he was very cautious when given a fatwa. One day somebody came to ask him a fatwa. When he put forward his question, Ibn Umar answered, "I have no knowledge concerning what you're asking." The man went his way. Can you imagine? Someone who lived alongside the Prophet. He didn't try to make anything up. He just said, "I don't have that knowledge." MashaAllah. He was so pious. Many men in that position would have given an answer and it might have been the wrong one. He had hardly left the place when Ibn Umar rubbed his hands, happily saying to himself, Ibn Umar has been asked about what he doesn't know. So he said, "I don't know." He was very much afraid to perform ittijad, independent judgment, in a legal question. In his fatwa, although he was living according to the instructions of a great religion, a religion which grants a reward to the one who makes a mistake and 2 rewards to the one who comes out with the correct righteous fatwa. However, Ibn Umar's piety deprived him of the courage to make any fatwas. In the same way, he refrained from the post of judge. The position of judge was one of the highest positions of state and society, guaranteeing the one engaged in it wealth, prestige, and glory. Why would the pious Ibn Umar need money, prestige, and glory? The Caliph Uthman once sent to him and asked him to hold the position of judge, but he apologized. Uthman asked him, "Do you disobey me?" Ibn Umar answered, "No, but it came to my knowledge that judges are of 3. One judges ignorantly, he is in hell. One who judges accordingly to his desire, he is in hell. One who involves himself in making ittijaj and is unerring in his judgment, that one will turn empty-handed. So no sin committed and no reward be granted. I ask you by Allah to exempt me." Uthman exempted him after he pledged him never to tell anyone about that. For Uthman knew Ibn Umar's place in the people's hearts, and he was afraid that if the pious and the virtuous knew his refraining from holding the position of judge, they would follow him and do the same. Then the Caliph would not find a pious person to judge. It may seem as if Ibn Umar's stance was a passive one. However, it was not so. Ibn Umar did not abstain from accepting the post when there was no one more suitable to hold it than himself. In fact, a lot of the Prophet's pious and virtuous companions were actually occupied with fatwa and judgment. His restraint and abstention would not paralyze the function of the jurisdiction, nor would it cause it to be held by a qualified ones. So Ibn Umar preferred to devote his time to purifying his soul with more worship and more obedience. Furthermore, in that stage of Islamic history, life became more comfortable and luxurious, money more abundant, position and authority ranks more available. The temptation of money and authoritative ranks began to enter the hearts of the pious and faithful, which made some of the Prophet's companions, Ibn Umar among them, to lift the banner of resistance to that temptation by means of making themselves models and examples of worship, piety and abstention, refraining from high ranks in order to defeat their temptation. Ibn Umar made himself a friend of the night, praying at night, crying and asking forgiveness. During its latter hours before daybreak, he had once, during his youth, seen a dream. The Prophet interpreted in a way which made the night prayer Allah's utmost hope and the means of his delight and joy. Let us listen to him while he narrates the story of his dream. During the prophetic era, I saw a dream in which I was riding a piece of brocade, which let me fly to any place in paradise. Then I saw 2 approaching me, intending to take me to hell, but an angel met them, saying, "Don't be afraid." So they left me. My sister Hafsa narrated the dream to the Prophet, peace be upon him, who said, "What an excellent man Abd Allah is. If he is praying at night, then let him pray more." From that day until he met with Allah, he never stopped performing his night prayer, neither while in one place nor while traveling. he was frequently praying, reciting the Quran and praising Allah like his father. His tears rolled down abundantly whenever he heard a warning verse in the Quran. Ubayd ibn Umar said, I was once reading to Abd Allah Ibn Umar this verse, how will it be for them when we bring from every nation a witness and bring you to witness over them? On that day, those who disbelieved and disobeyed the messenger will wish the earth to be split open and swallow them. But they will never conceal God any of their sayings. Quran 4:41-42. Ibn Umar began to cry till his beard was wet from his tears. One day he was sitting among his brothers reading, woe to those who give insufficient measure, who, when others measure for them, they make full measure. But when they measure out or weigh out for others, they give less than due. Do such not think that they shall be raised up on a mighty day, the day when all mankind shall stand before the Lord of the worlds. Quran 83:1-6. Then he repeated again and again, the day when all mankind shall stand before the Lord of the world, while his tears were rolling down like heavy rainfalls from the sky until he fell down because of his tremendous sorrow and crying. His generosity, asceticism, and piety all worked together in a complete harmony to shape the most magnificent merits of the great man. He gave out abundantly because he was generous. He granted the final halal things because he was pious, never caring if his generosity left him poor because he was ascetic. Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, was one of those who had high incomes. He was a successful, honest merchant for a great part of his life, and his income from the treasury, Bayt al-Mal, was abundant. However, he never saved that money for himself, but always spent it copiously on the poor, the needy, and the beggars. Ayub ibn Wali al-Rasibi tells us about one of his generous acts. One day Ibn Umar was granted 4,000 dirhams and a piece of velvet. The next day Ayub ibn Wasir saw him in the market, buying his camel some fodder on credit. Ibn Wal went to his house asking his close relatives, wasn't Abu Abd al-Rahman, i.e. Abd Allah Ibn Umar, granted 4,000 dirhams and a piece of velvet yesterday? They replied, yes. He then told them that he had seen him in the market buying fodder for his camel and could not find money for it. They told him he didn't go to sleep before distributing all the money. Then he carried the velvet on his back and went out. When he returned, it wasn't with him. He asked him about it, and he said, I gave it to a poor person. Ibn Wal went out shaking his head until he entered the market. There he climbed to a higher ground and shouted to the people, O merchants, what do you do with your life? Here is Ibn Umar, who's been granted 4,000 dirhams, so he distributes them. Then the next morning he buys fodder for his camel on credit. The one to whom Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a tutor. Umar, his father, must be a great man, deserving all that is great. Ibn Umar's generosity, asceticism, and piety, these three qualities demonstrate how sincere his imitation of the prophetic model was and how sincere his worship. He imitated the Prophet, peace be upon him, to the extent that he stood with his camel where the Prophet had once stood. A camel's foot may stand over a camel foot. His respect, good behavior, and admiration towards his father reached also to the far extent Umar's personality forced his foes, his relatives, and above all his sons, all to pay him respect. I say the one who belongs to the Prophet and the kind of father should never be a slave of money. Large amounts of money came to him, but soon passed, just crossed his house at that moment. His generosity was never a means of arrogance. He always dedicated himself to the poor and needy, rarely eating his meal alone. Orphans and poor people were always present. He often blamed some of his sons when they invited the rich and not the poor ones to the banquets, thereupon saying, you leave the hungry behind and invite the sated ones. The poor knew his tenderness, felt his kindness and sympathy, so they sat down across his path for him to take them to his house. When he saw them, he was like a sweet-scented flower, surrounded by a drove of bees to suck its nectar. Money in his hands was a slave, not a master, a means for necessities and not luxury. Money was not his alone. The poor had a right to it, a mutually corresponding right, with no privilege kept to himself. His self-denial helped him to reach some great generosity that he never stored, endeavoured, or had a vivid interest toward the worldly life. On the contrary, he never wished to possess more than a gown to cover his body and just enough food to keep him alive. Once a friend come in from Khorasan presented him with a fine, delicate, handsome, embellished and decorated gown, saying to him, "I brought you this gown from Khorasan. I would be pleased to see you take off this rough gown and wear this nice one." Ibn Umar said, "Show it to me then." He touched it, asking, "Is it silk?" His friend said, "No, it's cotton." Abd Allah looked at it for a while, then pushed it away with his right hand, saying, "No, I'm afraid to tempt myself. I'm afraid it would turn me into an arrogant, proud man. Allah dislikes the arrogant and proud ones." On another day, a friend presented him with a container filled with something. Ibn Umar asked him, "What's that?" He said, "Excellent medicine, which I brought you from Iraq." Ibn Umar said, "What does it cure?" He said, "It digests food." Ibn Umar smiled and said to his friend, "Digest food? I haven't satisfied my appetite for 40 years. He who has not satisfied his appetite for 40 years has not curbed his appetite due to need or poverty, but rather due to self-denial and piety and a trial to imitate the Prophet and his father." He was afraid to hear on the day of judgment, "You have wasted all your good deeds for the enjoyment and the life of this world." He realized that he was in this life just a visitor or a passerby. He described himself saying, "I haven't put a stone upon another, i.e., I haven't built anything, nor planted a palm tree since the Prophet's death." Mamun ibn Murran once said, "I entered Ibn Umar's house and tried to evaluate all that was inside, such as the bed, the blanket, the mat, and so on. Indeed, everything. I didn't find it worth either 100 dirhams. That was not due to selfishness. He was very generous. But it was due to his asceticism, his disdain of luxury, and his adherence to his attitude to sincerity and piety." Ibn Umar lived long enough to witness the Umayyad period, when money became abundant and land and estates spread, and a luxurious life was to be found in most dwellings, let alone most castles. Despite all that, he stayed like a firm-rooted mountain, persistent and great, not slipping away from his path and not abandoning his piety and asceticism. If life with its pleasures and prosperity, which he always escaped from, was mentioned, he said, "I've agreed with my companions upon a matter. I'm afraid if I change my stance, I won't meet them again." Then he let the others know that he did not turn his back to the worldly life owing to inability. So he lifted his hands to the sky, saying, "O Allah, you know that if it weren't for fear of you, we would have emulated our clans in the Quraysh in this life. Indeed, if it were not for his God-fearing self, he would have reviled people in this life. He would have been triumphant. He did not have rival people. Life was driving towards him and chasing him with its tempting pleasure. Is there any position more tempting than the Caliph? It was offered to Ibn Umar several times, but he refused. He was threatened with death if he refused, but he continued his refusal and his shunning. Al-Hasan, may Allah be pleased with him, reported, when Uthman ibn Affan was killed, it was said to Abd Allah Ibn Umar, "You are the people's master and the son of the people's master. Go out, so that people swear to you an oath of allegiance." He said, "By Allah, if I could, I would never allow a drop of blood to be shed because of me." They said, "You will either go out or we will kill you in your bed." He repeated his first statement. They tried to tempt him by frightening him, but all in vain. After that, when time passed, the civil strife became rampant. Ibn Umar was always the hope of the people who urged him to accept the Caliph's position. They were ready to swear to him the oath of allegiance, but he always and consistently refused. His refusal may seem as a reprehensible act. However, he had his logic and argument. After the murder of Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him, the situation got worse and aggravated in a dangerous and alarming way. Although he was very humble towards the position of the Caliph, he was ready to accept its responsibilities and face its dangers, but only on the condition that he be voluntarily and willingly chosen by all Muslims. However, to force one single Muslim to swear an oath of allegiance by sword was what he opposed, and so he refused the post of Caliph. At that time, however, this was impossible despite his merits and the public consensus of love and respect for him. The expansion into different regions, the long distance between them, and the disputes which furiously set between the Muslims and divided them into sects fighting each other made it impossible to reach each consensus set by Ibn Umar as a condition for his acceptance of the Caliph. A man once met him and said, "No one is more evil in the whole Muslim community than you." Ibn Umar said, "Why, by Allah? I've never shed their blood or divided the community or sowed dissension." The man replied, "If you had wished, every single one would have agreed upon you." Ibn Umar said, "I don't like to see the caliphate being offered to me while one man says no and another one says yes." The people still loved him, even after events changed, and the caliphate went to Muawiyah, then to his son Yazid, then to Muawiyah's second son Yazid, who stepped down, renouncing his pleasure after a couple of days in office. Even on that day, when Ibn Umar was an old man, he was still the people's hope and the hope of the caliphate. Thus Muawiyah went to him, saying, "Give me your hand to swear to you the oath of the allegiance. You're the master of the Arabs and the son of the master." Ibn Umar asked, "What are we going to do with the people of the East?" Muawiyah said, "Beat them until they swear the oath." Ibn Umar replied, "I don't like to be 70 years old and the man gets killed because of me." Muawiyah went away singing, "I can see civil strife boiling in its pots, and the kingdom after Abd Allah Ibn Yazid will end in the hands of the victorious. This refusal to use force and the sword is what made Ibn Umar hold a position of neutrality and isolation during the armed civil strife between the parties of Ali and Muawiyah, reciting those solemn words, "To the one who says, 'Come to prayer,' I will respond. And to the one who says, 'Come to success,' I will respond. But to the one who says, 'Come to kill your Muslim brothers, to take his money,' I will say no." But while remaining neutral and isolated, he never turned to hypocrisy. How often did he confront Muawiyah, while the latter was at the summit of his authority, with challenges which confused and hurt him, till he threatened to kill him. And he was the one who said, "If there is only a tiny hair between me and the people, it won't be torn." One day, Al-Hajjaj stood preaching and said, "Ibn Az-Zubayr has distorted the book of Allah." Hereupon Ibn Umar shouted in his face, "You are lying, you are lying, you are lying." Al-Hajjaj was at a loss, struck by surprise. Everything and everyone was terrified, even by the mention of his name. He promised Ibn Umar the worst punishment, but Ibn Umar waved his hand in Al-Hajjaj's face and replied, while people were dazzled, "If you do what you just promised, there is no wonder about it, for you are a foolish, imposed ruler." However, despite his strength and bravery, he remained cautious until his last days, never playing a role in the armed civil strife and refusing to lean towards either of the parties. Abd Allah al-Ibn related, "I was once walking behind Ibn Umar without his realizing it. I heard him saying to himself, 'They are holding their swords, raising them high, killing each other, and saying, "Oh, Ibn Umar, give us a hand." He was filled with sorrow and pain, seeing Muslims bloodshed by their own hands. As mentioned at the very beginning, he never awoke a sleeping Muslim. If he could have stopped the fight and saved the blood, he would have done that. But the events were too powerful, therefore he kept to his house. By his heart was with Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, and not only his heart, but it seems his firm belief based on the narration of what he said in the last days. I never felt sorry about something that I missed, except that I didn't fight on the side of Ali against the unjust party. However, when he refused to fight with Imam Ali, on whose sides truth was, it was not because he sought a safe position, but rather because he refused the whole matter of the dispute and civil strife and refrained from the fight, not one in which Muslims fight disbelievers, but one between Muslims who cut each other into pieces. He clarified this when Nathi asked him, "O Abu Abd Rahman, you are the son of Umar and the companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and you, who you are, what hinders you from the matter?" He meant fighting on Ali's side. He replied, "What hinders me is that Allah has forbidden us to shed the blood of Muslims. Allah the Mighty and Powerful said, and continue fighting them until there is no more persecution and God's religion prevails." Quran 2:193. And when we did that, we fought the disbelievers until Allah's religion prevailed. But now, what is it we're fighting? I fought when the idols were all over the sacred house, from the corner to the door, until Allah cleared the land of the Arabs from idolatry. Should I now fight those who say there is no God but Allah? That was his logic, argument, and conviction. Thus he did not refrain from fighting, nor abstain from taking part in battle to escape fighting, nor did he passively refuse to determine the outcome of the civil war within the Ummah of the faithful. Rather, he refused to hold a sword in the face of another Muslim brother. Abd Allah Ibn Umar lived long and witnessed the days in which life opened its gates to the Muslims. Money became more abundant, high positions more available, while ambition and desire spread. But his magnificent psychological capacities changed the rules of his time. He changed the era of ambition, money and civil strife into an era of asceticism, humility, piety and peace. He turned persistently to Allah and lived accordingly to his worship, firm belief and humbleness. Nothing whatsoever could affect his virtuous nature, shaped and modelled by Islam during his early years. The nature of life changed within the beginning of the Umayyad period. This change was inevitable. It was a period of expansion in every aspect of life, in the ambition of the state as well as the ambitions of individuals. In the midst of the excitement, of temptation and agitation, of an era lured by idea and expansion, with its pleasure and booty, stood Ibn Umar with his merits, occupying himself with his excellent spiritual progress. He gained from his great excellent life all that he desired, so that his contemporaries described him by saying, Ibn Umar died while being like Umar in his merit. Moreover, dazzled by the glitter of his merits, his contemporaries liked to compare him with his father Umar, saying, Umar lived in a time when similar ones could be found, and Ibn Umar lived in a time when there was no one similar to him. It is an exaggeration which may be forgivable because Ibn Umar deserved it, but as for Umar, no one can be compared to him. It is absolutely out of the question that a similar one is to be found in a tiny time period. May Allah bless them and watch over them. Brothers and sisters, that's the end of this Dear Sahaba. And join us tomorrow and we'll do another story, inshallah.